If you are not enough from within, then $1 million isn't going to change that. It's very likely a poor, unhealthy relationship with sex. When we explored that, sex became mind-blowing. If I'm squandering my time, it's not productive and it leads to regret instead of happiness. I think it comes down to an inadequacy with themselves. I think if they were to recognize their own nature, their own greatness, they would have a better relationship with everything and everyone. Within everything, one of the huge components of that is sex. And until they get to that point, they're just expending a whole lot of wasted energy. We only have so many units of energy every morning when we wake up. And I think that that's just a lack of someone understanding their nature. Money has a way of complicating things. It isn't the panacea that most people think it is, meaning, well, if I had $10 million, I wouldn't have any problems. It's just not true. The problems just shift. The challenges just change. There's just a whole new set of complexities. People that have $10 million or $100 million sitting in the bank, they don't wake up in a worry-free, stress-free state. So when you think about why someone that's very wealthy financially, you think, well, boy, what problems do they have? One of those, yes, is very likely a poor, unhealthy relationship with sex that is actually hurting them. It's hurting their productivity at work. It's hurting their relationship because they've not created harmony in their relationships. You can't have a healthy sex life, in my opinion, or at least in my experience, without having a healthy, harmonious relationship first. You know, it's interesting. I always thought I had a great sex life, and I certainly did. I always have. The first 22 and a half years of my marriage, it was basically sex every day with very few exceptions. In the last year and a half or so, especially in the last 8 or 9 months, since acquiring a mentor that really helped us with our relationship and our communication, as we became more intimate in our communication, in our ability to extend trust, to recognize how important authentic expressions of respect and accepting and claiming one another and inviting one another into our relationships, into our hearts. As we learned the tools for that, which we didn't know, her and I are both like, okay, great. We always, for the most part, got along really well, but you know, modest disagreements, never yelled, never swore at each other, never any name calling. But there was a certain depth of intimacy that we had never explored. When we explored that, sex became mind-blowing. I was leaving the solar system every time. And that, I believe, is a result of the emotional intimacy. You know, I think people historically would say that, you know, for women, it's about emotion, for men, it's just physical. I've noticed that for me, and my friend first said this to me 5 or 6 years ago. He said, Vince, maybe I'm becoming more like a woman. Maybe my estrogen's high. I don't know. But for me, if there is not, he was dating people at the time, if there is not a deep emotional connection, I don't really enjoy sex much. And it was a super vulnerable thing for a man to say that, right? The reality is that's been true for me too, that the best sex has been when I am most intimately and deeply and lovingly connected to my wife. That is by far more fulfilling, more satiating. It's fully satiating. Emotional intimacy leads to an abundance of sexual intimacy. As I think about a business owner who is trapped by his compulsion to sex or his addiction with sex, all of this creative energy, all of these units of productivity are being expended over here. Let's just say leaked. Just imagine that your energy, you have a certain amount of energy, certain amount of attention, certain amount of time, certain amount of money, and how you're using that is your one resource that you have. And when that's gone, it's gone. And so if it's leaking out to illicit or super unproductive fantasies or obsessions, you're going to deplete your productivity. When that happens, you're not going to ultimately get what you ultimately want. You may get what you want now, like in the next 10 minutes or in the next week, but ultimately it comes at the sacrifice of what you want most. What do I want now? What do I want most? And the ability to differentiate between those and to make the sacrifices, sacrifices is a loaded word, the investment, to put the energy and attention and time into your ultimate future, the future that, again, you ultimately want. When you look at how do I want the next 10 years, the next 20 years to play out? I'm the author here. Consider your time, energy, attention, and money. And how are you using those? Well, if you've got leaky sex outlets, you're using it in places that are not serving your ultimate purposes. That's inefficient. It's not productive, and it leads to regret instead of happiness. I've been pretty fortunate in the circles that I've been in, but I do know a few people who have soured relationships and literally killed relationships because they could not create boundaries for their sexual appetite. And so as I think about the ability to say, what are my boundaries? What are those things that I could be doing fully intentionally in my relationship so that all of my sexual creative energy is pouring in a very intentional way, rather than almost subconsciously pouring out into, others around and focusing peripherally. That's a distraction, and it's going to rob you of your intimacy, rob you of your sexuality, your sexual expression. To be honest, I'm not sure I am qualified. There's probably psychological research on this, right? And what to do in that type of situation, what causes it. That's probably outside my realm of expertise. Other than for me speaking personally, if I had that situation, I would want to just be very expressive and study it and see it and understand those feelings. Where are they coming from? Why are they there? And get curious about that. And I'd be open about it with my partner. If you are not enough from within, then $1 million isn't going to change that. And $10 million isn't going to change that. And neither is $1 billion, which is why you have very wealthy people who are still holding out signs to say, look at me, mom. Like 50, 70, 80-year-old grown men that are out there, self-aggrandizing, out there very arrogantly seeking attention, clamoring, making very corrupt decisions. It's probably another one of those questions that there's probably psychological research on this. I will just say that for me, where I'm in a relationship with my wife, we feel safe with one another. We have complete trust. We've never had affairs. We've never gone out and created situations that would put us at risk of having our sanctity of our marriage. And that has helped because we've said these are the bounds for us. I would say that for any individual who's struggling with those bounds, I would say define what those are. And it's probably something totally different from someone who's single versus, in my case, in a marriage at this point, almost 25 years. I love this question. And I'll say, I believe that what I'm going to share applies not just in sexuality and relationships, but in all facets of life that I can think of. I will say that when I left religion, my experience was I had my faith shelf broke entirely, and I no longer could believe. You couldn't hold a gun to my head and say, I need you to believe. I couldn't. Once I got to that point, I fully acknowledged that everything I had believed and had been certain about was no longer true for me. And so then I had to go in and very intentionally, and I hired 3 different coaches that were faith transition, religion type of transition coaches that had dealt with hundreds of people like this. And so they really had a beautiful expertise that helped me tremendously. And here's what it helped me to realize. Just because I left, just because my belief left, doesn't mean that all of the 45 years of indoctrination about certain principles had left. They were still deeply embedded in me. These beliefs, I needed to be this knight in shining armor. I still needed to be this leader. I still needed to do these things, and I still needed to teach everybody everything. And I realized that you have to intentionally pause and say, what do I believe about relationships, about sexuality? How will I define our relationships? What fantasies are within the bounds? What activities, what sort of physical relationship do we feel brings us together? And then let's define that. Because if I were a gay man and I were defining my sexuality based upon my religion's belief when I was in that religion, I wouldn't let myself love romantically. I would have forced myself to say, no, that is an unclean, unworthy, unrighteous feeling, and I need to, pray the gay away and find a way to love a woman when I'm totally gay. That's a drastic example that just shows our programming from thousands of years of religion, from someone else's thinking, very often imposes and occludes our ability to look at our relationship and define it ourselves, and to give it full expression as we, my partner and I, feel brings us authentically most closely together. There were things that in 22 years of marriage, her and I had never even talked about sexually, about, our histories, our beliefs about it, what we enjoy. You just would think that we just talked about it, we didn't. And when we decided to explore that and define it ourselves, we came to really understand one another's needs. And it was just one huge breakthrough in our physical relationship. I say whatever it takes. Some people will need to do an immense amount of work, especially if there's been, physical or sexual abuse or relationships where they felt betrayed or deserted or lost. I'm sure it varies, but the reality is, whatever the amount of work is, and I don't know that the work ever ends, but there are breakthroughs, more opportunity to go through and have a higher consciousness. That has been the process for me. And every time I have this breakthrough where I come up on another false peak, I think, oh, now all my problems are going to be solved. Now I just unlocked that. Now I have no animosity towards any creature, anything that, how could I possibly have any challenges in my life now? And then you're like, oh, that's how. So I think whatever amount of work is needed, stay on that path of doing the inner work, meaning of understanding yourself more deeply, of seeking to understand others, to looking at everything and everyone with a lens of compassion, with grace. As we do that, we unlock the depths of intimacy and the bonds of the relationship. We strengthen them like cords, and those cords tie us to other people around us in the most beautiful ways. And that's what I've been experiencing as I've been able to just give myself permission to be more intimate and open and open my heart and be vulnerable with other people. It's created more intimacy in my relationships and hence more depth and beauty and fulfillment. I think it's a problem of priorities. You will get no greater joy in your life than from your relationship with yourself, and then your relationship, in my opinion, with a romantic partner. No greater joy. And so then when you say, I'm too busy on what? Something that has less capacity to enrich your life. Your business, the boys' night with the boys, whatever it is that is a secondary or probably even a tertiary priority in your life, is now taking the place of the single greatest thing in your life, the single greatest relationship in your life. And if you forfeit that for something, again, that matters at the long term. And if that most important relationship in your life is at the mercy of the many trivial things, the secondary and the tertiary things, the people that are out further in our orbit, that probably ought to be way out in our orbit, coming in and eclipsing that primary relationship, you've really done yourself quite a disservice. And so what's the answer to I'm too busy or I don't have time or I'm too tired? Is to say, take a look at the life that you ultimately want the most. Really sit with that. Really manifest that and feel it and see it and smell it and all your senses in high definition. And if you are like me, you see that with a romantic partner that you love and you feel loved deeply by them. And you say, that becomes priority number one. That becomes the place where I'm going to invest the most time, energy, and attention, and money. When people die, the FOMO that they have is not that they went and partied and had affairs and were able to go have a body count. It wasn't that they were able to build a bigger kingdom, a bigger empire. The actual fear of missing out, coming to the end of your life and realizing this devoted human that loved you so deeply that you left some intimacy on the table and you left some of your heart and some of your love behind. You didn't just fully let all of that pour into your partner and receive all of the love that's reciprocated when that happens. That will be the regret. And because that is what everybody says, and you're human, you have the same freaking DNA as all these other people that have that regret, you could look upstream and say, in 30 years or 50 years, if I continue to do what I'm doing, and if I'm chasing these sexual leaks of energy and attention, and if I'm squandering my time instead of in those relationships that are lasting, that will be with me when I'm in the nursing home, then you've robbed yourself and you've literally created your own regret. And that's a travesty. I'm going to say it metaphorically because I'm not sure I really have beliefs around the soul per se. And that is that you give away a portion of your soul. Every time you act outside of an integration with yourself or outside of integrity, outside of truth as you know it, you sacrifice, you give away a portion of your power to create happiness for your life. You give away a portion of your own moral authority to be a positive influence for the people around you, your children, your spouse, your very best friends that have been there for you. So if you want to be an emotionally available father and husband and friend and reciprocate all of the great love and joy that they've brought to your life, the best way to show up in the most powerful way is for you to be a fully healed and whole human that has taken full power of your life. And so you're integrated. You're deeply integrated. And when you're deeply integrated, you're going to be a wonderful friend because you're you, authentically and uniquely you. And you'll be an amazing father, an amazing husband. You know, a relationship has to be recaptured every day or it just dwindles. It needs sunlight and water. As I think about the relationships that have become malnourished, over time they kind of just gradually let that happen. And so in the case of affairs, it's never going to be that I just woke up and decided to take my secretary to work. And most people, the affairs they do have, about 1 in 3 people do have an affair, and usually it's with someone you're working with. They don't just wake up and go have an affair. They contemplate it and they ruminate about it and they calculate it and then they fantasize about it. Boy, if I could create a situation where I can be at lunch with her, or I can be over here with her, or in this city with her, those lead to compromising situations, which increases the likelihood that you are going to crush your spouse's happiness, which will crush your happiness. And so having the foresight to say, that would be a very expensive thing. I'm not even going to entertain it because I don't want to tempt myself with that. And so then I create boundaries and say, no, these are the things I won't do. These are the temptations I won't put myself into. I will avoid those. and not spend any energy, any attention fighting that temptation or debating or renegotiating with that temptation. Super unproductive, super unhealthy, bad for the mindset, bad for your alignment, poor for your own integration of your life. The thing that helped me the most was simply having processes. My wife and I went to a relationship retreat, and the time was so valuable for us. We could have gone on our 15th vacation to Hawaii or Paris or whatever, but we went up to Canada and we spent a week going through processes that helped us to communicate. And communicate, not that we had these impasses or misunderstanding, but that we sought to have more enlightenment and more depth and more intimacy. And so having processes that helped us to open up one another's hearts and to really see one another was the biggest impact. And so I would say anyone who would like to create stronger bonds in their relationships, invest in the time, the processes, the coaching that will bring your relationship to a state where it's blossoming and growing and flourishing. I think if we were to look at our DNA as humans, we would find that our inclination towards money is rooted in a biological need for shelter, safety, warmth, food, whatever. And then with sexuality, again, it is deeply instinctual. So we have power and money and influence and sex. As I think about how to tame these, how to utilize them in nature's in nature's intended way, it is returning to ourselves and having a full understanding of my place in the world, my place with sexuality, how it plays out, my place with power, and how I see that playing out. And instead of playing checkers, oh, if I get this deal done, then I'll have this power, I'll have this money, going many steps, many years, many decades into the future. If I do this deal, I'll get really wealthy. It's going to hurt those people. I'm going to have to lay those people off. But it's okay because, hey, the shareholders did, after all, give me this money. I needed to make this play. No, but to go further out now in our evolution of humanity and say, this is how I want my life to play out with my influence. Power is a word that we've kind of automatically tied to corruption. And I don't think it needs to be that way. Yes, most people do use it. They get a little power. They begin to practice coercion and manipulation on others. But I believe that power is evolving in leadership in healthy ways, and that it will continue to evolve. And it's that leaders will continue to use their power more like MLK Jr. did. He had great power, and you can see the effect of his power, and you can see how selfless it was. He was one who is committed to utilizing his power for the greater good of everyone. And I look at that power and I say, wow, power can be very good, very beautiful. Well, now how will I utilize my sexuality? Because sex is a very powerful force. How will I use that? How will I use power? How will I use money in my life? And I think that when we sit with ourselves and we have clarity within ourselves and we see that, then we start to say, what are the habits in my life that don't align with the way that I want to be remembered? If I'm at my funeral and my wife is talking about how I used power or money or sex, would I admire or would I be ashamed of if the truth were to come out? If an AI bot were to follow my life and give me, and at my funeral give a 60-second summary of my life, of everything that it saw, would I be ashamed? Yeah, oh shit, yeah, it saw everything. Ooh, I was hoping that wouldn't come out. Or would I be listening to that AI and say, yeah, that's how I wanted to use my power. I wanted to have that influence. Oh yeah, I wanted to be generous with my means. I wanted to be able to use my sexuality to create these 6 humans and to create a deeper bond with my wife. And look at how that worked out for me. I feel loved, and I love in return. So it's an alignment of those instincts.